You're standing in the shadows of a sprawling Roman villa. The year is 50 CE. Torches flicker, their golden light dancing across marble statues of gods and nymphs, their carved faces frozen in eternal revelry. The air is thick with the scent of spiced wine, myrrh, and something forbidden, a whisper of secrets that cling to the walls. Laughter and muffled moans drift from behind heavy silk curtains, where Rome's elite gather in the dead of night. This isn't a scene from a lurid tale spun by modern imaginations. This is the Roman Empire, a civilization celebrated for its aqueducts, legions, and laws that shaped the Western world. But behind the grandeur of the Colosseum's roaring crowds and the Senate's marble halls lies a question that has haunted historians for centuries. Were Roman orgies real, or were they scandalous myths spread by enemies to tarnish Rome's legacy? Today we'll peel back the layers of history, diving into archaeological evidence, ancient texts, and eyewitness accounts to uncover a world where pleasure and power collided in ways that will shock you to your core. The Roman Empire stretched across 3 continents, from the misty hills of Britannia to the sun-scorched deserts of Egypt, ruling millions with an iron grip of discipline. Its roads connected distant provinces, its legal codes laid the foundation for modern governance, and its emperors were revered as living gods. Yet, whispers of wild feasts, sexual excess, and secret rituals have lingered through the ages, passed down in stories that both fascinate and horrify. Were these tales exaggerated by early Christian writers, eager to vilify the pagan empire they sought to replace? Or did Rome's elite truly host debauched gatherings that defied every moral boundary known to humanity? This isn't about sensational gossip or tabloid-style rumors. It's about understanding how sexuality, religion, and power intertwined in one of history's greatest empires, shaping the lives of millions in ways we can scarcely imagine. If you're drawn to dark, forgotten history, the kind that lurks in the shadows of textbooks, hit that like button and subscribe to join us on this journey. Comment below. Where are you watching from? Let's uncover the truth together. Show frescoes from Pompeii with sensual scenes. The Romans didn't shy away from sexuality. It was woven into the very fabric of their culture. Erotic art adorned their homes, from mosaics depicting lovers entwined in passionate embraces to phallic amulets hung at doorways to ward off evil spirits. Unlike our modern taboos, Romans embraced sensuality as a natural part of life, celebrated in their art, religion, and daily routines. But did this openness extend to orgies? The word itself conjures images of chaotic indulgence, bodies entangled in a haze of wine, desire, and abandon. Yet, the reality is far more complex than Hollywood fantasies or moralistic condemnations. We'll explore the infamous Bacchanalia, a religious festival that shocked even the Romans themselves, and delve into the lives of emperors like Caligula, whose names became synonymous with excess. Archaeological finds like the provocative frescoes of Pompeii's villas, and texts from poets like Juvenal and historians like Suetonius, suggest a society where pleasure wasn't just indulgence, it was a calculated tool of control. Rome was a city of stark contradictions, a place where public virtue clashed with private decadence. Publicly, the Republic and later the Empire championed ideals of discipline and morality, with laws punishing adultery and moral decay among the elite. Privately, the powerful indulged in lavish convivia, banquets where wine flowed freely, exotic foods piled high, and entertainment blurred the lines of social decorum. Show a reenactment of a Roman banquet with overflowing goblets and performers. These gatherings weren't mere parties, they were power plays where senators, merchants, and emperors displayed their wealth and dominance over their guests. Sexuality was no exception. Juvenal's biting satires describe gatherings where senators abandoned restraint, their togas cast aside in favor of indulgence, while Suetonius recounts tales of emperors hosting feasts that pushed every limit of decency. But how much was true? Were these stories propaganda, spun by rivals or moralists to discredit their enemies? Or did they reflect a darker reality hidden beneath Rome's polished surface? To answer, we'll start with a scandal that shook the Roman Republic to its core, the Bacchanalia of 186 BCE. This wasn't just a festival, it was a crisis that revealed Rome's deepest fears about power, pleasure, and control. Get ready, the truth is darker than you think. Imagine you're a young Roman, invited to a secret rite in a moonlit grove just outside Rome's bustling streets. The year is 186 BCE. Drums pulse through the night, their rhythm hypnotic, pulling you deeper into the darkness. Wine flows like rivers, its heady scent mingling with the smoke of bonfires. The crowd chants to Bacchus, the god of ecstasy and liberation, their voices rising in a fevered crescendo. The Bacchanalia were religious festivals honoring Bacchus, known to the Greeks as Dionysus, But they became Rome's most infamous scandal, a moment when the Republic's rigid order seemed to unravel at the seams. These weren't quaint ceremonies with solemn hymns and modest offerings. According to historian Livy, they were chaotic gatherings of thousands, where men and women, free citizens and enslaved people, mingled in ways that defied Rome's strict social hierarchy. But were these events truly orgiastic, or were they exaggerated to justify a brutal crackdown? Let's dig into the evidence and uncover the truth behind this explosive moment in Roman history. Livy, writing decades later in his monumental History of Rome, describes scenes of debauchery and violence that would make even the most jaded modern audience flinch. Show a reenactment of a bacchanalian rite with shadowy figures dancing around bonfires. He claims participants, intoxicated by wine and religious fervor, engaged in unrestrained acts, blurring the lines of class, gender, and morality. Men and women danced together, a shocking breach of decorum in a society where public interactions between sexes were tightly controlled. Livy goes further, suggesting darker crimes, murder, extortion, and even conspiracies against the state, lurked beneath the revelry. The Roman Senate, alarmed by reports of these secret meetings, saw the Bacchanalia as a direct threat to the Republic's stability. In 186 BCE, they issued the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a decree etched in bronze, still preserved in Italy's archaeological museums today. Show an image of the bronze tablet. This wasn't a minor law, it was a sweeping ban, ordering the arrest of thousands and the destruction of bacchanalian shrines across Italy. Why such a drastic response? The Senate feared the Bacchanalia undermined Rome's social order in ways that went beyond mere indulgence. Livy reports that the rites attracted not just the lower classes, laborers, freedmen, and slaves, but also nobles, including women of high status who defied their roles as virtuous matrons. Show a depiction of Roman women in flowing togas, their faces painted with defiance. In a patriarchal society where women's behavior was strictly regulated, their participation was a scandal in itself. The mixing of classes and genders threatened the Republic's rigid hierarchy, where power rested on clear distinctions between citizen and slave, man and woman, elite and commoner. The Senate's decree didn't just ban the rites, it restricted gatherings, limited priesthoods, and required state approval for any bacchanalian worship. Livy claims over 7,000 people were arrested, and many were executed, their bodies left as warnings to others. Show a reenactment of Roman soldiers arresting revelers under torchlight. But there's a catch. Livy was a moralist, writing under Emperor Augustus, who was obsessed with restoring traditional Roman values after decades of civil war. Was his account exaggerated to paint the Bacchanalia as a moral abomination, justifying the Senate's brutal response? Other sources, like the playwright Plautus, hint at less scandalous gatherings, where wine, music, and dance fueled celebration rather than chaos. Yet, the Senate's reaction was undeniably real, suggesting something about the Bacchanalia struck a nerve. Pause for effect. The rites weren't just about pleasure, they challenged Rome's obsession with control, especially over sexuality and religion. If this scandal shocks you, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Did the Romans overreact, or was something darker at play? Next, we'll explore the role of emperors like Caligula, whose infamous feasts took indulgence to new heights. Stay tuned for a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about Rome. You're a guest at a grand palace in Rome. The year is 38 CE. The hall glitters with gold, tables grown under heaps of roasted peacock, flamingo tongues, and exotic fruits from distant provinces. The air is heavy with the scent of spiced wine and burning incense, and the Emperor Caligula reclines on a velvet couch, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous intensity. His feasts are the stuff of legend, whispered about in every corner of the empire, from the forums of Rome to the farthest outposts. But these aren't mere banquets, they're spectacles of power where pleasure becomes a weapon, and indulgence masks a deeper agenda. The name Caligula, or Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, is synonymous with excess, madness, and debauchery. Stories of his lavish parties, filled with wine, dancers, and forbidden acts, have fueled the myth of Roman orgies for centuries. But how much of this is true? Was Caligula the depraved tyrant of legend, or a victim of slander crafted by his enemies? Let's dive into the accounts of his reign to uncover the truth behind his infamous feasts, separating fact from fiction. Show a reenactment of a lavish Roman feast with opulent decor, overflowing goblets, and veiled dancers. Caligula ruled for just 4 years, from 37 to 41 CE, but his name looms large in the annals of history. Ancient historian Suetonius, in his Lives of the Caesars, paints a vivid and unsettling picture of feasts that pushed every boundary of Roman decorum. He describes Caligula hosting convivia, grand banquets, where guests dined on delicacies like ostrich and peacock, drank from golden goblets encrusted with jewels, and watched performers who blurred the lines between art and scandal. Suetonius claims Caligula took shocking liberties, openly flaunting his power by demanding the wives of senators join him in private chambers during these feasts. One chilling account tells of him inviting senators to dine, only to humiliate them by forcing them to perform degrading acts for his amusement, such as dancing or reciting poetry in mockery. Show a depiction of a humiliated senator in a disheveled toga, head bowed. These feasts weren't just about pleasure. They were calculated displays of dominance, reminding Rome's elite that the emperor held absolute power over their lives and dignity. But Suetonius wasn't the only voice. Cassius Dio, another Roman historian, describes Caligula's palace as a stage for unprecedented excess, where entire wings were transformed into spaces for indulgence, with noblewomen and freedmen allegedly forced into servitude to satisfy the emperor's whims. One particularly lurid story recounts a feast where Caligula, dressed as a god, perhaps Apollo or Jupiter, demanded worship from his guests, blurring the line between mortal ruler and divine being. Show an image of Caligula in divine attire, crowned with a golden laurel. These accounts are gripping, but there's a critical catch. Both Suetonius and Dio wrote decades after Caligula's assassination, under emperors who had every reason to vilify him. Caligula's death in 41 CE was orchestrated by the Praetorian Guard and senators, who supported his successor, Claudius. By painting Caligula as a monster, they justified their coup and legitimized the new regime. Could their stories be exaggerated or even fabricated to serve a political agenda? Archaeological evidence offers a more grounded perspective. Excavations on the island of Capri, where Caligula maintained a lavish villa, uncovered sprawling dining halls adorned with intricate mosaics, hidden chambers, and private baths, spaces designed for more than just dining. Show images of Capri's archaeological remains with colorful mosaics and marble columns. These findings suggest that Caligula's feasts were real and extravagant, even if the orgiastic details were embellished. The emotional weight of these stories hits hard. Imagine being a senator's wife, summoned to Caligula's feast, knowing that refusal could mean exile or death for your entire family. The fear, the humiliation, the utter powerlessness. It's a stark reminder of how Rome's elite used pleasure as a tool to control and degrade those beneath them. Pause for effect. Not every source paints Caligula as a depraved tyrant. Philo of Alexandria, a Jewish philosopher who met Caligula in 40 CE, described him as erratic and self-obsessed but stopped short of confirming the wildest tales of debauchery. This suggests the truth lies in a gray area. Caligula's feasts were real, extravagant, and likely scandalous, but their orgiastic nature may have been amplified by his enemies to cement his infamy. Show a reenactment of a tense banquet scene with Caligula laughing as guests cower. His short reign ended in a brutal assassination, his name forever tied to scandal and excess. If this glimpse into Caligula's world shocks you, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Was he a madman indulging in depravity, or a myth created by those who wanted him erased? Next, we'll explore the archaeological treasures of Pompeii, where art and artifacts reveal Rome's unapologetic obsession with sexuality. Stay tuned for a story that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Roman Empire. You're walking through the ruins of Pompeii. The year is 79 CE, frozen in time. Ash blankets the streets, preserving a city that once thrived under Rome's rule. You step into a villa, its walls adorned with vibrant frescoes, lovers entwined, gods in passionate embraces, scenes that make your pulse quicken. Pompeii, buried by Vesuvius, is a time capsule, offering a raw, unfiltered glimpse into Roman life. Its art and artifacts reveal an obsession with sexuality, fueling myths of orgies that echo through history. But do these provocative images prove the existence of wild, debauched gatherings, or are they a reflection of a culture unafraid of sensuality? Let's explore the archaeological treasures of Pompeii to uncover what they tell us about Rome's relationship with pleasure and power. Show vibrant frescoes from Pompeii's Villa of the Mysteries. Pompeii wasn't just a city, it was a playground for Rome's elite, a place where wealthy senators and merchants built lavish villas to escape the capital's prying eyes. Excavations since the 18th century have unearthed a wealth of evidence. Mosaics depicting erotic encounters, statues of Priapus with exaggerated features, and even graffiti boasting of sexual conquests. One famous fresco from the House of the Vetii shows a couple in an intimate embrace, painted with startling realism. Show the Vetii fresco. These images weren't hidden in back rooms. They adorned dining halls and public spaces, suggesting sexuality was celebrated, not shameful. But do they depict orgies? Not quite. Most frescoes show individual acts or mythological scenes, not chaotic group revelry. Yet, their prominence hints at a culture where sensuality was woven into daily life, from art to religion. The Lupanar, Pompeii's infamous brothel, offers more clues. Show images of the Lupanar's erotic paintings. This two-story building with its small rooms and explicit wall paintings served clients from all classes: sailors, merchants, even senators. Above each doorway, vivid frescoes illustrated services offered, a menu of sorts for visitors. Graffiti scratched into the walls records names, prices, and crude boasts. "Here I had a good time with Solemnus," reads one. The Lupanar wasn't a place of orgies but of structured commerce, where sexuality was transactional, regulated, and open. Yet, its existence challenges the myth of Rome as a prudish society. Nearby, the Villa of the Mysteries contains an enigmatic fresco cycle, often linked to Baksheek rituals. Show the Villa of the Mysteries frescoes. These paintings depict women in ecstatic poses, possibly initiates in a secret cult, dancing and drinking under a god's gaze. Some scholars argue this proves orgiastic rites, while others see it as symbolic, not literal. The emotional weight of Pompeii's finds is staggering. Imagine being a young slave in the Lupanar, your life reduced to a transaction, your name scrawled on a wall for eternity. Or picture a noble woman in the Villa of the Mysteries, caught between devotion and societal expectations, her secrets buried under ash. Pause for effect. These artifacts reveal a society where sexuality was both celebrated and controlled, a tool for pleasure and power. But there's a catch. Pompeii's evidence doesn't explicitly show orgies. The frescoes and graffiti suggest a culture open about sex, but not necessarily chaotic. Later Christian writers, like Augustine, used these images to condemn pagan Rome, exaggerating their significance to paint a picture of moral decay. Show a reenactment of a Roman villa party. Still, Pompeii's openness shocks modern sensibilities. Phallic symbols adorn doorways, lamps, and even bread loaves, suggesting a society that saw sexuality as divine, not sinful. This contrasts with the moralizing tales of orgies, which may have been amplified to vilify Rome's elite. Show a phallic amulet from Pompeii. The truth lies in the middle. Rome embraced sensuality, but organized orgies were likely rare, confined to specific rituals or private excesses. If Pompeii's secrets intrigue you, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Do these artifacts prove Rome's decadence, or just its honesty? Next, we'll explore the lives of slaves and courtesans, whose roles in Rome's pleasure culture reveal a darker side. Stay tuned for a story that will leave you questioning the cost of Rome's indulgence. You're a slave in a Roman villa, the year is 100 CE. The clink of goblets and laughter of the elite echo through the halls, but your world is one of shadows and servitude. Your life isn't your own, your body, your labor, even your desires belong to your master. In Rome's pleasure culture, slaves and courtesans were the unseen pillars, their existence fueling the lavish banquets and whispered scandals that gave rise to myths of orgies. While emperors and senators reveled, those at the bottom of society paid the price, their stories buried beneath the empire's grandeur. Who were these men and women forced to serve Rome's desires? Were they mere objects of indulgence, or did they wield subtle power in a world stacked against them? Let's uncover their hidden lives and the dark cost of Rome's obsession with pleasure. Show a reenactment of a slave serving at a Roman banquet. Slaves were the backbone of Roman society, making up nearly a third of the empire's population. Captured in wars, born into servitude, or sold for debt, they had no rights, their bodies subject to their master's whims. At convivia, lavish feasts of the elite, slaves served food, poured wine, and performed as dancers or musicians, often in provocative roles. Ancient texts, like those of Petronius in his Satyricon, describe slaves as fixtures of these gatherings, their presence blending into the decadence. One chilling passage depicts a young slave boy, dressed as a mythological figure, performing for drunken guests, his vulnerability ignored. Show an image of a Roman mosaic depicting slaves. These weren't voluntary roles. Refusal meant punishment, often death. The emotional weight is crushing. Imagine being a child, torn from your family, forced to entertain strangers who saw you as less than human. Courtesans, known as meretresses, occupied a different but equally precarious space. Unlike slaves, some courtesans were freed women or lower-class citizens, trained in music, poetry, and seduction to entertain Rome's elite. Show a depiction of a courtesan playing a lyre. They weren't just prostitutes. They were skilled performers, often educated, who navigated a dangerous line between influence and exploitation. The poet Ovid, in his Ars Amatoria, describes courtesans as central to Rome's social scene, charming senators at banquets while risking their reputations. One famous courtesan, Volumnia Cytheris, was linked to Mark Antony, her presence at feasts blurring the line between guest and servant. Yet, her status offered little protection. Courtesans were often discarded when their beauty faded or their patrons tired of them. Show a reenactment of a courtesan at a banquet. The Lupanar in Pompeii, the city's infamous brothel, reveals the grim reality for many. Show images of the Lupanar's erotic frescoes. Slaves and low-born women worked in cramped cells, their lives reduced to transactions recorded in graffiti. Morthes Fellas, 2 asses. One inscription reads, naming a woman and her price, about 2 days' wages for a laborer. These women faced disease, violence, and social scorn, yet their labor fueled Rome's economy and pleasure culture. The contrast is stark. While the elite indulged in lavish feasts, those serving them lived in fear and degradation. Pause for effect, but some courtesans wielded subtle power. By charming powerful men, they gained wealth or influence, like Pretia, who reportedly swayed political decisions through her connections. This duality, exploitation and agency, makes their stories complex. These accounts challenge the myth of orgies as carefree revelry. For slaves and courtesans, Rome's pleasure culture wasn't indulgent, it was survival. Show a reenactment of a slave girl looking nervously at guests. Later Christian writers like Tertullian used these figures to condemn Roman decadence, but their narratives often ignored the victim's humanity, focusing instead on moral outrage. The truth is more nuanced. Rome's feasts relied on the labor and bodies of the powerless, whose suffering underpinned the empire's glamour. If these stories move you, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of the lives of Rome's slaves and courtesans? Next, we'll explore how Romans themselves viewed these practices, and how their own laws tried to control them. Stay tuned for a story that reveals the empire's divided soul. You're standing in Rome's bustling forum. The year is 100 CE. The air hums with voices, merchants haggling, senators debating, and moralists preaching virtue. Above you, temples to Jupiter and Venus loom, symbols of a society that reveres both discipline and desire. Rome's pleasure culture, with its lavish feasts and whispered scandals, wasn't just a private affair, it was a public obsession, debated in markets and codified in laws. The myths of orgies, fueled by tales of Bacchanalia and Caligula's excesses, clashed with Rome's image as a bastion of order. How did Romans themselves view these practices? Did they celebrate their openness, or did they fear the chaos of unchecked desire? Let's explore the laws, writings, and voices of the time to uncover how Rome grappled with its own indulgence. Show a reenactment of the Roman Forum with senators and citizens. Rome prided itself on virtus, a code of honor, discipline, and moral strength. Publicly, the elite championed laws to uphold this ideal, especially in matters of sexuality. The Lex Julia de Adulterius, passed by Emperor Augustus around 18 BCE, was a cornerstone of this effort. Show an image of a Roman legal tablet. It punished adultery with exile or death, targeting women of the elite who strayed from their roles as virtuous wives. Augustus, eager to restore traditional values after years of civil war, used this law to project an image of moral purity. Yet, the same emperor banished his own daughter, Julia, for alleged affairs at lavish banquets, hinting at the hypocrisy within Rome's elite. Her exile to a remote island, described by historian Tacitus, was a public spectacle meant to warn others. Show a depiction of Julia's exile. Roman writers reveal a society divided. Poet Juvenal, in his satires, mocks the elite for their hypocrisy, describing women who play the chaste matron by day, but slip into debauchery by night. His words drip with scorn, painting feasts as dens of immorality where senators and their wives abandoned restraint. Show a reenactment of a satirical scene, but Juvenal was a satirist, exaggerating for effect. In contrast, poet Ovid, in his Ars Amatoria, celebrates Rome's sensual side, offering advice on seduction at banquets and festivals. His work, though playful, led to his exile by Augustus, suggesting that even light-hearted takes on pleasure could threaten the state's moral narrative. These conflicting voices show Rome wrestling with its identity. Was it a city of virtue or a playground for vice? The public's perception wasn't uniform. Common Romans, from shopkeepers to laborers, often saw elite feasts as symbols of excess, fueling resentment. Graffiti in Pompeii mocks the rich, with one scrawl reading, "The rich feast while we starve." Show Pompeii graffiti. Yet, festivals like the Saturnalia, where social norms were temporarily inverted, allowed even the lower classes to indulge in wine and revelry, blurring the lines between master and slave. Show a reenactment of Saturnalia celebrations. These events, sanctioned by the state, suggest Romans tolerated controlled indulgence, but feared uncontrolled excess, like the Bacchanalia, which threatened social order. Philosophers like Seneca warned against moral decay, urging restraint in a society where pleasure was both celebrated and regulated. The emotional impact of this tension is profound. Imagine being a Roman matron, caught between societal expectations of chastity and the allure of a banquet where boundaries dissolved. Or a commoner watching the elite indulge while you scraped by, your resentment simmering. Pause for effect. Rome's laws, like the Lex Julia, aimed to curb excess, but their enforcement was selective, targeting those who challenged the elite's power. Later Christian writers, like Tertullian, seized on these contradictions, condemning Rome's pagan immorality to promote their faith. But the truth is complex. Romans both embraced and feared their pleasure culture, creating a society where desire was a double-edged sword. If this clash of virtue and vice fascinates you, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Did Rome's laws hide hypocrisy or protect order? Next, we'll wrap up with a reflection on how these myths shaped Rome's legacy. Stay tuned for a conclusion that ties the past to our present. You're standing on the ruins of Rome's Forum. The year is 2025. The marble columns are weathered, but their shadows still whisper of an empire that shaped our world. The tales of Roman orgies, wild feasts, bacchanalian rites, Caligula's excesses, have echoed through centuries, painting a picture of decadence and moral decay. But were these stories true, or were they myths crafted to vilify a civilization that dared to embrace desire? From the bronze decrees of the Senate to the frescoes of Pompeii, we've uncovered a Rome where pleasure was both a celebration and a weapon, wielded by the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. What does this legacy teach us today? Let's reflect on how Rome's pleasure culture shaped its fall and continues to resonate in our modern world. Show panoramic views of Rome's ruins. The myth of Roman orgies, fueled by ancient historians like Suetonius and Livy, was never just about scandal, it was about power. The Bacchanalia of 186 BCE, with its chaotic rites, threatened Rome's rigid hierarchy, prompting a brutal crackdown. Caligula's feasts, whether exaggerated or real, showcased an emperor's ability to bend others to his will. Pompeii's frescoes and graffiti revealed a society unashamed of sexuality, yet reliant on the labor of slaves and courtesans who had no voice. Roman laws, like the Lex Julia, preached virtue while the elite indulged in private, exposing a hypocrisy that fueled public resentment. Show a montage of previous visuals, bacchanalian reenactments, Capri mosaics, Lupanar graffiti. These stories weren't just gossip. They reflected a society grappling with the tension between freedom and control, desire and restraint. Early Christian writers like Tertullian and Augustine seized on these tales to condemn pagan Rome, framing its pleasure culture as proof of moral rot. Their narratives shaped how we view Rome today, turning orgies into a shorthand for decadence. Show an image of early Christian manuscripts, but the truth is more complex. Rome's openness about sexuality was both liberating and oppressive. It celebrated sensuality in art and festivals like Saturnalia, where slaves and masters briefly mingled as equals. Yet, it exploited the powerless, slaves in the Lupanar, courtesans like Volumnia Cytheris, women like Julia exiled for defying norms. This duality reveals a society not unlike our own, where public ideals often mask private contradictions. Pause for effect. The emotional weight is heavy. Imagine the countless lives erased by history whose suffering fueled Rome's grandeur. Their stories remind us that power, unchecked, turns pleasure into pain. Rome's legacy endures in our fascination with its excesses. Movies, books, and TV shows glorify Roman decadence, from Caligula's feasts to Pompeii's brothels, but they often miss the human cost. Show clips from modern media depicting Rome. Today we wrestle with similar tensions. How do we balance personal freedom with societal order? How do we judge cultures whose values differ from ours? Rome's fall in 476 CE wasn't caused by orgies, but by economic strife, political corruption, and external pressures. Yet, the myth of decadence persists, a cautionary tale about the dangers of excess. The graffiti of Pompeii, the laws of Augustus, the cries of the enslaved, they all whisper a warning. Power built on exploitation is fragile. Show a reenactment of Rome's ruins at sunset. This journey through Rome's pleasure culture reveals a truth as relevant now as it was then. Societies are defined not just by their triumphs, but by how they treat their most vulnerable. Show a montage of Roman artifacts fading to modern cityscapes. The myths of orgies may be partly true, partly exaggerated, but they force us to confront uncomfortable questions. How do we wield power today? Who pays the price for our pleasures? If this exploration of Rome's dark side has stirred you, hit that like button and subscribe for more forgotten histories. Share your thoughts in the comments. What shocked you most about Rome's legacy? Where do you see its echoes today? Pause for effect. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the shadows of an empire. If you want more stories that challenge what you thought you knew, check out our other videos and join our community. Until next time, keep questioning the past. It's the key to understanding our present.